Hey everybody, Ross with Coins and Coffee here. In today's video, we're going to be reviewing transitional penny errors. We're going to be defining what exactly is a transitional error, which year those errors occur, and then we're going to see what to look for identifying those errors. And then finally, what is the average value that you can expect to find from them? A transitional year is going to be a period of time where the composition alloy of the planchet or detail of the die is going to be different from the previous year. And these changes can be due to economic factors, wartime factors, and also details that the die can change due to efficiency of the strike. Our first example is not going to be a transitional error, but this is a transitional year. And in 1943, due to the war effort, the military needed copper for ammunition, and the US Mint adopted a zinc-coated steel planchet for the penny dies. Now, this was the first and only US coin to be magnetic and contain zero copper. However, the zinc plating would fade away fast and cause the coin to rust very quickly. By consumers, they were mistaken for dimes, and they could not be used in vending machines. Back then, you could actually use a penny in a vending machine. They had magnetic detectors in those machines so that people couldn't use a metal slug to get a bottle of Coke. So all in all, these pennies were not very popular at the time. Now that we have the 1943 steel cent established, we can now move on to our first transitional error. And in 1944, when the war was over, surplus copper from casings and cartridges were sent back to the US Mint to be melted down into pennies. However, there were some leftover steel planches that were used in error, and these errors were created by all three mints. However, there are only a few known to exist from the San Francisco Mint, making all of these pennies highly sought after. And the best way to tell if your 1944 cent is steel is to stick a magnet to it. Roughly 40 years later, 1982 is going to bring us to our next transitional year. The rising cost of copper has now outvalued the cost of the penny, and so the Denver and Philadelphia Mint sought to replace the copper planchet with a zinc planchet that would to be coated in copper. And between the two mints, they had created 7 different pennies that year. Here we have a list of all the pennies that were minted in 1982. And starting at the top, we have Philadelphia copper large and small dates, then Denver copper large date, and then Philadelphia zinc large and small dates, and Denver zinc large and small dates. Now, the best way to tell between a zinc and a copper penny is to weigh them. And copper pennies go to weigh around 3.11 grams, while zinc are going to weigh around 2.54 grams. The next 2 clips will be going over both large and small dates and how to tell between the two. Now, the biggest factor between these two is going to be the number 2 itself. And for the large date, it's going to have more of a straighter point that's going down towards the bottom of the 2. And if we draw a line from the base of the 2, we can see that the bottom of the 8 falls just below this line. And here we have the small date, and we can see that the 2 indeed is different from that of the large date, is that it has a curved point going towards the bottom. And when we have the same line drawn as before, we can see that the bottom of the 8 is now flush with the bottom of the 2. We can see that 1982 was a very busy year for the 2 mints, and with as many transitions going on, there was bound to be a transitional error. And this brings us to the 8th coin that was minted in 1982. While the Denver Mint was only scheduled to produce copper pennies with the large date, there have been examples of 1982D copper small date pennies found. And if you find a 1982 small date from Denver and it weighs 3.11 grams, then you have struck gold. While 1982 was officially to be the last year that copper planchets were to be used for the pennies, in 1983, the Philadelphia Mint did send out some pennies with a copper planchet. And so check any 1983 penny that you have and make sure that it weighs 3.11 grams. 5 years later, in 1988, is our next transitional year. There were plans to change the reverse die of the coin, and for the initials FG, which stands for Frank Gasparo, there were going to be changes on the G. On the left, we see highlighted the G of the 1988 reverse die, and then on the right is the plans that were made for 1989, and that we can see that there's an addition of a horizontal line that goes into the G as well as a vertical line going down towards the bottom of the G. During the latter part of 1988, there were some pennies that were minted with the 1989 reverse die. And so if you can find a 1988 Philadelphia or 1988 Denver with the different G on the back, then you have found this year's transitional error. Now we come to a close with our last transitional error, and this will be in 1992. We're going to be looking at the spacings between the A and the M of America on the reverse die, as well as the spacing of FG in relation to the memorial. And so the closer spacing between the A and the M in the dies were meant for the following year in 1993. In late 1992, this new die was tested and most of the coins were meant to be destroyed, but a few made their way into circulations. Here we have a close-up of the two reverse dies, with the wide AM on the left and the close AM on the right. Notice on the wide AM, if we draw a line from the tip of the F, that it will not match up with the base of the memorial. Conversely, if we draw that same line on the F of the close AM, it will match up with the base of the memorial. So if you're ever in doubt with the spacings of your A and M, look to how the F lines up with the base of the memorial to tell whether or not you have a wide AM or a close AM variety. Being that most of the pennies that were created during test were recovered, the ones that are out in circulation are very scarce and fetch a sizable amount of money, especially the 1992 Denver close AM. And that concludes our review of the transitional errors for modern Lincoln cents. I really hope you enjoyed watching this, as I want to bring entertainment and education to the coin community as my small contribution. Again, thank you all for watching. This has been Ross with Coins and Coffee, and I'll catch y'all next time.